I wanted to take a moment and talk to you all about what we call air layering in plants. The idea that you can make a clone of a plant without using a seed, because essentially, when you take a seed, let's say it's an apple, and you plant that seed, you like this gala apple. Well, in order to get that apple, you have to have a mother and a father. It's kind of common sense, isn't it? That's how it works. um, Humans can't do this. Next part. But a plant, you take a very old oak tree, you take any other plant, and you let them grow long enough, especially the old oak trees. What you'll notice is that the limbs will eventually reach back down to the ground, and when they touch, they will, where they touch the ground, grow new roots. And you'll see with some of these older oak trees, like in Europe, England especially, some places in the South, um, if the right humid conditions are there, and the tree is willing to give off that desire to still live, it will grow roots on those sections. So you'll see someone will say, "This is a tree that's 5,000 years old," and you look and it just looks like a bunch of bushes. You know, it's a bunch of trees together, and you think, "Of which one's the original one?" Well, the one in the center, and the ones there where the limbs were that rooted, that touched the ground. This same technique is called air layering. And nature does this normally, as I say right there, with old growth trees or with grapevines or anything. Like you take a grapevine, scar it a little bit, and especially on a node where a leaf comes out, and without taking a cutting, you can get it to root in the air by wrapping dirt around it with a plastic bag, covering with foil. Well, I've gone over this in the past, but I don't think I've ever really gone over what an orchid does. And it's taken me many years to get this do this, so I wanted to show you. And this is not where I keep my orchid. I keep it kind of more in a shaded area. It does get diffused light, but an orchid is a wonderful thing. I mean, it's an amazing plant that blooms with the most beautiful flower. Reminds me of one of the most beautiful things you've ever seen in your life. And in the darkness, it always has that beauty and crispness to the flowers. No, this is a moon orchid, so keep that in mind. As I've stated, and the lighting is not the greatest. This is the moon orchid. Um, you're going to focus on it. There we go. This is a moon orchid, and I have it tied up. You know, it's been here for a while. It's kind of a little, could use some fertilizer. But what I've done is stressed it a little bit. What you come up with is when the leaves come out, they've kind of changed because it flowered. Now you're getting petals. You're getting almost like a new plant. And that's exactly what you're getting. These are roots. So you have two babies right here. And if I let this grow out, and if I let this grow, eventually they will get stronger roots, and they will grow. Now, what I can do is I could air layer these. I could take what's starting to happen. I can take a little bit of soil in a bag, wrap it around them. You know, you can get a plastic thing that looks like a disc that folds in half, put it around it, close it. Probably wouldn't work too well on these because they're not exactly straight. They work the best if you're trying to air layer a grapevine or a tree and you want to put them on, scar the area in between, lock them on. But with this method here, I think leaving it as it is going to become two new orchids, and then the main one. So it's drawing a lot from here, but because an orchid takes a lot of moisture from the air itself, you have this. And I wanted to really show people what we have. You know how orchid roots are. You can see the orchid roots. I've neglected this a great deal. I don't really water it a whole lot. Maybe once a month or so. And it likes it very dry, very woody, because that's what it is. It's a lot of people think of an orchid as a parasite, but it's not a parasite. It's actually a plant that has a symbiosis with the host plant. Orchid uses that host plant for stability, just as the stick is doing. And as it grows up, the side of the tree, what it does is it takes those roots and it puts them into the bark. So we have to really think about why it's doing this. It's not doing this to air layer itself in a way that the modern sense, the common sense you're thinking with dirt and soil, but once they get those into the bark of a tree, and it knows there's going to be moisture in that tree, there's going to be some sap, there's going to be rain that's going to be falling down, and it's going to hold itself in there. Now eventually this bottom part would die off and it would slowly grow up the tree. That's why when you see orchids in nature, you see a lot of them growing in the tree bark. They start off on the ground where a bird would bring them and drop them, and they root and they crawl up. That's why they get that long stem and flower. And when they do, they anchor these root systems into the tree. And just like that great oak I'm mentioning, or chestnut tree, there's two that I can think of offhand in England. There's one, I believe, in Greece. You will see that it creates from those limbs new places that it can root, because if this main part dies, say in this plant or this tree, it has a second way of feeding itself. And if that dies off, this will just renew itself. It's why in a lot of ways I'd like to think of those trees that live beyond the normal span of their lifetimes. They find a way to become immortal, because the immortality of them is that they can reproduce themselves without a seed, without a mother and a father, and make a clone of themselves. So these are essentially a clone. But in the orchid world, you will have some babies from this, because that's where the flower is attached. So if you're dealing with this, if you have an orchid, I want to give you a little bit of understanding why it's doing this and how. Think of it being on a tree, and if you anchor it properly, you will have two new orchids you can take and put into soil. Now, when you put them into soil, I want you to think about this. I have a wooden container, a plastic liner that drains, and this is basically bark. There's a little bark in here. I have no problem with people that do the ice cube method, just sit an ice cube once in a while. The only caveat to that is to make sure you don't have the ice cube sitting directly on the root, or you will kill it. A little bit of water, misting it once in a while. And when you do transplant those little tiny babies, give them time. Don't rush it. Let them grow to where they need to be. Don't get in a hurry with it. They will be just like the parent plant. And they love the bark. They love the bark because that's essentially what they are rooting into on the tree. People wonder, why don't you want to give them great soil? Why don't you want to do that with an orchid? Why do orchids live in very acidic soils, very poor soils? Well, that's why. Because they don't essentially live, for the most part, on the soil. They root on those places in the bark where they can tuck their roots in and just get enough moisture from the tree. So there. If you have orchids, enjoy them. They're that kind of plant you can forget and water occasionally, and they don't really require a whole lot. Just don't keep them in direct sunlight like I have this one right now. I'm going to put it back where I had it originally, and it'll do very well.